Welcome, Cristian, sometimes known as Christian, but the same good guy. Welcome to our Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
No, my pleasure. I think people are going to get a real kick and some really cool knowledge and information by what you're doing. Always the best place to start is if you could briefly introduce yourself. We'll get to the business in a minute, but who are you? Where are you from originally? Where you are now? Family? Tell us.
Yes, I'm currently based in Sweden, in Stockholm. This is the fifth country where I live. Most of my career has been in Germany, Switzerland. I also had the chance to spend a year in Singapore. And I'm originally from Romania. That's actually where I lived until I was, until I left university. And more interestingly, I come from a really small, tiny town, 10,000 people. And I often think, how fascinating that my universe, has been, until 17, living in my tiny town, this 10,000 people. And then, of course, the bubbles got bigger and bigger, especially living in places like Singapore and, traveling around the world. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit of the origin story.
And what about family? By the way, with the Olympics going on and gymnastics, Nadia's name always keeps coming back. And I'm from Montreal, where we had the Olympics, where she starred.
Indeed, Nadia Comaneci. Yeah, I mean, there are a few names, from a small country like Romania that you hear a lot, and yeah, Nadia is definitely one of them. Yeah.
What about your family?
Well, my dad is retired now, but he's professionally he's been a professor of chemistry and physics. And to his disappointment, neither me nor my brother we didn't inherit the love for physics. My mom, she's a nurse. My brother, he's a lawyer. So yeah.
All right, you got all the professions kind of covered there. That's pretty.
yeah, it's a good mix. Yeah, everyone has been learning a little bit from the others, and yeah, I remember sometimes my mom joking that my dad was kind of becoming quite skilled in all the diseases and the most common symptoms people have, because she's been always debriefing him on everything she learned during the day from patients. So yeah.
I like it. I like it. Well, speaking about your mom and dad and whatnot, and what were you like as a kid? Were you into gadgets? Were you transforming things all the time, or were you a reader, playing sports, music? What were you like?
So my parents said that I was a really easy kid. They were probably also a lot more relaxed because I was the second one after my brother, who was already 6 years older than me. So they had plenty of time to get used to the second boy in the house. But I was always having top academic results, never really creating any sort of problems. And I think having that also allowed me to kind of gain my independence, because they've seen, okay, he's a good guy, we can give him full freedom, which also gave me the opportunity to start kind of exploring with lots of things very early on. I was always kind of entrepreneurial. So my first money was made as a teenager, troubleshooting software and hardware. Back then, Windows 95 was not the most stable operating system. So it was crashing, at least a few times a month. And then that was my opportunity to monetize. So, and yeah, I grew up, it was a mix of books, watching a lot of Discovery Channel. I was always fascinated, by all the documentaries, and compared, to today's times when you have video on demand and you can really watch only what you want. Back then, I had to kind of keep on watching, and it was interesting, that you're going from, even at the time, climate change to dinosaurs to crime documentaries to technical things. So yeah, I always found that extremely educational. So yeah, that gives you a bit of a flavor of the kind of kid I was.
Yeah, you remember back to that time. If you didn't watch the show, you missed it, basically.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. Yeah.
Pretty
and
amazing.
there wasn't much of cartoons at the time, so documentaries were a lot easier.
Yeah, the cartoons that there were, they talk about violence now. The cartoons that there were that came about were actually pretty violent, a lot of them.
Indeed. I look at sometimes, I have a 5-year-old boy now, and sometimes I feel like, yeah, let me expose you to some of the cartoons I was watching. And then like, yes, now I see them with different eyes.
That's for sure. So 5-year-old boy, do you have one son?
One son, yeah.
Very cool. That's a great age too. And mine are in their 20s. So you've probably heard this before, but cherish every moment because it goes super fast. Um,
That's how it feels indeed. 5 years went like a blink, but yeah, trying to be as present as possible and to cherish those moments
exactly.
of creating new memories.
You better believe it. So speaking of memories, let's talk about your journey a little bit and education wise. You were involved in economics, digital transformation, disruptive strategy. What intrigued you to take that path?
Well, so interestingly, I've also done an economics high school,
Mhm.
and I was very good, for instance, at financial accounting at the time. But I knew that even though I like it academically, it was relatively static. I mean, if you look at how the accounting profession looks like, I mean, it doesn't change that much, right, over the decades. I was a lot more attracted by more dynamic fields, fields that are changing a lot, especially when there is a technology piece in it as an enabler for new capabilities.
Mhm.
That was something that attracted me. The first professional step for me was 2 years in a consulting boutique back in my home country, Romania. That was the place where I was exposed a lot to multinational companies, and I felt at the time, being fresh out of university, I felt it was really fascinating to look at these monster giant companies with all of their processes and impressive way of working.
Sure.
So I was eager to see how it feels like. I was not so much interested in a local office in Romania. I wanted to see how it feels like in a regional or global office somewhere in Europe. And it just happened that the first company that offered me a job was based in Germany, giant headquarter, 7,000 people, a giant corporation, more than 500,000 employees. And that's where I followed basically the technology transformation trends, and initially I applied it indeed in digital marketing. When you try to do digital marketing, you actually realize very quickly that you cannot do it in isolation
Right.
within the marketing department. You have to have a very strong collaboration with, of course, IT, with customer service, even with finance to calculate properly the ROI. So that kind of made me organically a champion for bottom-up digital transformation. That was the next step that I had the chance to work as part of the corporate strategy team of this corporation. And as soon as I was getting close to 9 years in this corporation, I felt like this is an amazing career. It was very fast. On one hand, I had a choice to just continue doing what I've been doing, and it will have been probably pretty organic professional growth. But then I felt like, no, I have to do something completely different. And this completely different chapter ended up being World Economic Forum. It was also, interesting because WEF, it's of course it's not easy to know what's happening behind the scenes. You see it, in the news every January about Davos, about presidents and CEOs going. So that was, quite attractive for me. And of course, I also liked the fact that it was a nonprofit with the mission of improving the state of the world. So I said, okay, let's give it a try to this world and see how it fits with my personality.
I love people that answered questions I'm going to have in advance. That's awesome. That was perfect segue. And we our own company, for example, we were founded and Fifth Element launched on the premise that leaders in their organizations, whatever the type of organization, can always do better when doing good. And you clearly understood that. You started talking about it because you were making a difference early on for customers in Romania. You were making a difference in digital marketing and transformation, both for customers and as a result, society at the same time. In fact, I get what you mean by it's beyond just marketing. We placed not too long ago the head of global digital transformation for a major satellite company, and you have to be an evangelist throughout to make that happen, and you can make a true impact. How did that evolve for you? And how did you evolve as well with that? Maybe you can share an example at DHL or World Economic Forum where you utilize your skills to achieve both an economic and social impact for the organization and stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, I guess all of us, no matter if we're part of a small or big organization, we're trying to have an impact. Sometimes, it's hard to feel exactly how, our impact is part of something very big, a very big machinery. Like I was mentioning, I was part of this giant corporation. But I think, going from macro level to individual level, something that it always made me feel good as an employee was looking up to some of my leaders, some of my mentors, some of my managers who truly showed care for me and for my colleagues, because it's quite common, that you see lots of managers who are very transactional, right? Okay, you have the KPIs, they don't even take the time, to get to know the individual. And I always appreciated a lot more the people who, took the time to understand, what's driving me, what are my aspirations. And I tried also, whenever I had the chance, to behave in that way. I was therefore, I think, lucky that, in this consulting boutique in Romania, to learn a set of values from some very inspiring people. At the time, I think I took it for granted, but then I realized, I was lucky to be exposed to such healthy principles in life. I tried to keep those with me when I also moved to the larger corporation in Germany. Of course, when it's such a big work environment, you have the chance to observe all kinds of environments, right? All kinds of leadership styles, some healthy, some not so healthy. But what was a very interesting time, actually, when I was at DHL, the logistics company, the global headquarters, there was a moment when they rolled out a new kind of way of looking at leadership. Quite simple, 2 words, 2 principles. They called it respect and results. And the idea was that managers should deliver the results, but while having a respectful leadership style, a respectful attitude towards stakeholders, towards clients. And it feels very basic, right? But of course, it came from the fact that some people were just focused on the results, and having therefore some negative side effects for their team members, for the wider stakeholders. And I think there are simple things like this that can really make a difference. And then DHL also became one of the organizations that started investing a huge amount of money into internal training programs, into making sure that people really have the chance to accomplish their dreams. And another thing that I really admired, not necessarily DHL, but the wider supply chain and logistics industry, is that a very high percentage of the employees are employees with very difficult jobs, couriers, people in the warehouses. And those people have a tough daily job, and if you don't show care, if you don't try to compensate them, if you don't make it easier for their families, for their communities, then I think you're having a big missed opportunities. And that was something I always appreciated at a company like DHL.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. We are on a Leaders Who Care series right now, and it clearly shows that if you do care, which doesn't mean you just hug, there's a lot to go in that, and respect and results is a great line for that, and it works. People want to be able to belong to something, and people that people then care about them. The fourth industrial revolution, kind of a good segue here a little bit, is really about technology. AI obviously for sure, but VR, AR, et cetera, and blockchain. But the fifth is about humanity. They're talking about, and we try to focus a lot on impact and talent to get results. After your experiences in the larger corps and in the global environments, and then even what I call social profits instead of I like that better, and startups, describe initially how Curator was born.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, as a teenager, right, I had this entrepreneurial drive. A lot of people, around me always thought like, yeah, you should give it a try with something entrepreneurial. It took me a lot longer than what I thought. That's also actually thanks to the great organizational culture that I found at a company like DHL, where I ended up, organically being promoted and having very exciting challenges and growing and learning a lot. At DHL, actually, in my last few years there was a big push for for intrapreneurial programs. So employees were encouraged to apply for internal funding, to take a percentage of their time allocated to incubating something that could then be spinned off into corporate startups. And that was something very intriguing for me. I was very close to considering applying, and then I got a job offer at World Economic Forum. And at WEF, of course, the years I spent there, I was surrounded by amazing entrepreneurs at all levels, startups, scale-ups, and of course, corporate entrepreneurs at very high level. So I felt like, okay, I was a sponge for a few years and getting, a lot of inspiration on how to do things right, what are the pitfalls that you can avoid. And then COVID came, which was kind of a reset for many of us, of course, around the world. It was a mix between a family decision, how we wanted to recalibrate our life as a family, having expanded from just being a couple to being a couple with a kid. Then I knew, of course, that if I was to do something, it has to be something in sustainability. I'm a pretty rational person, and if you're being exposed to the facts of climate change for years and years and years, I mean, you're like, okay, we need to do more. I mean, business as usual doesn't work. And of course, I also understand that not everyone can, live their life and, drop your usual corporate career and say, okay, I'm going to do something now related to sustainability. But I always felt, I have what it needs to do that. I felt like it was the right time. I also was happy, and very privileged to be able to attract as co-founders some other colleagues that I met at World Economic Forum, extremely skilled in what they're doing. Also with the context that in Europe, at least, at the time, it was quite a positive context and really motivating entrepreneurs to go into climate tech. So that's how I got the idea to do something that will ultimately, make a small difference in the fight for climate change. And Curator's mission, it's really nothing else but business-to-business matchmaking between the large corporations, and all serious corporations, of course, have their net zero commitments, and all the other companies that can help them achieve that. And it can be startups, scale-ups, or corporations. What surprised me, and that was the insights for starting Curator, is that despite the fact that we're literally running out of time, right, when it comes to climate change, the way that people team up for partnering for decarbonization, for sustainability, it's still very much based on traditional ways of engaging. People go to conferences, they're Googling it, they're asking for recommendations, and that's all fine. I think, we are humans, we need serendipity in our lives. But probably we also want something that's a bit more data-driven, that's a bit more algorithmic matchmaking. So you have, once you start a partnership, and usually in decarbonization, it can be a partnership for decades, especially if you take some hardware, some solutions that are early stage, and all the corporation is betting on that. Well, you want to make sure that you're betting your time and your budget on the most promising and the best match for you. So that's how Curator was born.
Wow, it doesn't sound like you had much problem transitioning to be the CEO co-founder, but you just hit it type of deal. Can you share a little bit more about your why, if you will, for doing it, and what you see the future is going to shape up to be as the world's first sustainability tech solution and scouting platform, as you describe it, but from both a business perspective and being a change maker, impacting the players that are in this decarbonization arena.
Yeah. So my why, I think, in many ways, I'm often, reminding myself, and I'm reminding the people around me, how lucky we are that we have the chance to actually follow such challenges. The fact that, we can do something professionally with our energy every day, that really resonates with our why, because we know, when we look around the world, there's actually millions and millions of people who don't have the chance to do that. It was also, spending the years at World Economic Forum, I was exposed to, the chance to go a lot deeper in what's happening with climate change. I had colleagues, who came from refugee camps. I had colleagues, who were, coming from places and bringing facts and stories that really resonate. And despite the fact that, I've never been someone who had anything to do really with sustainability, I knew that, of course, I have skills in digital innovation, in digital transformation, in digital business models. And I felt that, with this passion and with this skill set, I could attract, complementary skill set, people who have the sustainability, expertise, but then bringing it together into a business model that in the end serves a bigger purpose. And, initially when I wanted to go into entrepreneurship, I realized very quickly, you can't do it alone. You need those co-founders, you need the people, to exchange ideas very early. And I must say it was very tricky, maybe, more difficult than finding a spouse. And people were like, oh, let's do something in digital marketing. This advertising industry is giant, a lot of money to be made. Or let's do something carbon credits, you can keep huge margins. And that's the thing, a lot of people start and look at the opportunities where they can monetize the most. But for me, it was like, no, I'm going to try to focus my energy on something that can make the most difference. And it's not, for instance, that I don't believe at all in carbon credits, but you can't save the planet with carbon credits. You need to facilitate the growth of real hardware solutions in decarbonization, of real, software solution, of services that are transforming these giant carbon footprints that the big companies have. So with this why, I felt that maybe that's also the reason why so far it was relatively smoothly, how we've been able to grow Curator, because people resonate with this, right? They understand, okay, this is not a group of co-founders, of entrepreneurs who are only trying, to make their own journey and, trying to hit a financial jackpot, but they're really, trying to contribute to this wider problem.
No, it's fantastic. And how's the traction? How are you garnering the investors and the entrepreneurs together?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I was really questioning myself, if I'll be able to get this traction. I mean, ultimately, you start with one idea and you're alone, staring at your screen for weeks or months, and it's not always obvious, how are you evolving from that stage into a stage where you have investors, where you have colleagues, where you have clients. I think it was just sharing the passion and the vision of what this company could accomplish. I think for me as the initial founder, it always feels slower than how you would imagine that things could evolve or should evolve. But in the same time, when I look back, I realize like, wow, I mean, there's such a spectacular stage already where we are, having been recognized from many angles, people who come to us proactively, and they see how we can accelerate their decarbonization plans. So it feels very rewarding, I must say, from already, even though we are still an early stage startup, because evolving from a concept, from an idea of what could be, to something that already can make a difference, and something that you wake up in the morning and it gives you so much energy and passion. And that was actually one of the things I had to learn as an entrepreneur, how to kind of stop my brain from just thinking all the time how to grow this business, right? Because there's no stop at some point.
No, it's a 24/7 potential for sure. AI is growing very fast, obviously, and the importance of data, without doubt, and there's a lot of discussions on how it's going to impact the human element, how it's going to be ethical, how it's all that stuff. And every technology, everything always has sometimes even bad actors in it, even though most are good. Share your insights, if you want, how AI can be very positive and at the same time be used responsibly for advancement in the type of companies that entrepreneurs that you're bringing to the table.
So first of all, I see AI as another tool in the natural human evolution, right? I mean, the internet is a tool, electricity is a tool, fire is a tool, and as any tool, people use it for good things and people use it for bad things.
Right.
Of course, I think we try to surround ourselves by people who try to use tools for doing something positive. I always love when I see people's lives being transformed by a new technological wave and making their lives better, even though initially maybe it might be a bit disruptive or a bit scary. I think about the time when, when back at DHL in logistics, there was a time when the robots were, there was an increased, very big number of robots in the warehouses. I mean, nowadays people are used to seeing, videos of Amazon or, Alibaba warehouses that are almost completely, without humans. But during that transition, some of the people having those jobs, they were a bit, scared. I mean, what will happen? Will the robots take my job? In the same time, they also realized, I mean, the truth is this job is better done by a robot. It's so repetitive. It's so now rewarding for a human body and brain on the long term that it makes more sense that the robot does this super repetitive task and the human brain, it's better devoted to something more creative, something more added value. I see the same with AI. I mean, I see companies that, for instance, in a very concrete use case, have embraced AI to replace customer service agents. I mean, of course, worldwide, there's millions and millions of people working customer service. Is it the most rewarding career? Probably not, right? It's extremely repetitive, the KPIs, the minutes, the tracking and everything, right? So, of course, initially in the short term, there's going to be maybe, a difficult transition. But ultimately, all those people will need to, to find, new professional opportunities where probably there's going to be ultimately more rewarding, making more money. So that's how I look at AI. And, there are so many places where people are doing repetitive things, not added value. I was mentioning my brother is a lawyer, and he's like, even ChatGPT, even not talking about custom-made GPT or AI for laws, there are so many repetitive things, that can be facilitated by AI. And I always believe, that life it's not so much polarized. It's not black and white. There are many shades of gray, right? And I believe in the collaboration, right, between the human and the machine, between the human and technology, because that's ultimately what we've seen. It's the best outcome.
Yeah, couple more questions. Although they say, we say here in LA that we need to keep them wanting more so we can do a sequel. So who knows, may have to do that. But we have found, with startups and entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's not just the funding or the revenues that have become a problem. It's actually the conflict between founders and investors. Are you planning on offering potentially certain services to the entrepreneurs and investors? And I'll give you an example. There's a social profit that has this program called Nonflict that coaches people how to look at conflict differently, how to be active listeners, and it's really brilliantly done. And we have started to offer it to clients because, again, especially in startups, it's very easy for the founders to get stressed out and argue with investors and fail because of it. Are you planning to offer other services like that help them?
Well, first of all, it sounds super intriguing to me, this Nonflict. I'll definitely need to follow up with you and learn more about it.
Oh, sure.
And I'm saying this because organically, my personality is the type of personality that doesn't like conflict. I've heard this several times during my corporate career when people said like, yeah, you're really, you're patient with this stakeholder because, it will be so easy to just, confront them and, but you're trying to find angles in a way, that ultimately you don't have a conflict. But this, I also realize it has its pros and cons. I mean, of course, conflict sometimes can escalate, and can be the end of a beautiful partnership. And especially, with co-founders, I mean, you don't want to end up, having too many emotional things. Because that's the other thing, right? I mean, conflicts can immediately escalate. And I took a time in my life when I've been trying to study a bit of neuroscience and understand really how the brain works. What's happening with amygdala hijack and all those things. And you realize, at some point when people are so emotional, the rational discussion, negotiation no longer makes sense, right? Because the rational brain it's shut down. So yeah, I subconsciously as well as consciously, I try to avoid conflict as much as possible. But this doesn't mean that I am not having an approach when it's about transparency. I say, look, this is how I perceive this. This is how it makes me feel. This is how it makes other people feel. Those are, the implications. Let's talk about it in a way that, we can find a solution. And even recently, we had a situation among us, the co-founders, where probably, a very high percent of people will have ended up, finalizing that in a conflict. We finalized it in a friendly way. So yeah, pros and cons. Maybe it's slower, right? It takes more time to go through a non-conflictual approach. That's why, as I said again, I'm really intrigued to hear more about this method that you described.
Yeah, that's what we picked it up. And just even things like we found that help entrepreneurs be more successful. We you talk about soft skills. We actually changed the name of soft skills to high skills, HI, which is human intelligence, because leadership's going to have to be different with all the AI coming in, and rightly so, AI taking jobs that are boring. But how can leadership then empower maybe people then to do better things? So these are the type of things that make entrepreneurs, and anybody for that matter, successful, and could be a value. Those type of things can be value added to something like Curator. So because I talk about this a lot, so that's something we can chat about. But it's a really interesting time right now that we're going through between technology and humanity in that sense. Last question here. A client told me back in 2021. By the way, I was in Davos 2020 when we didn't know how many people had COVID back then.
Yeah, I know. I remember those discussions. We were thinking, what's happening? How many of us will be sick once we leave Davos?
Exactly. So he said the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. which I thought was really interesting. And, we look back, it feels like COVID was yesterday and also years ago, all at the same time. And with all that said, and we're already big time into 2024, what are you most grateful for? And also, what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, so interesting, that you asked this question, but you also mentioned Davos 2020 because I remember at the time, I came back to my wife and a tiny baby at the time, and I was really scared with that context of having the baby. And I must tell you that I had some days I was talking to my wife, said, I just hope we survive this, right? Because it was so unknown, the whole thing, it was so
Right.
surreal. I mean, the streets were empty, you couldn't, do anything. It was like we were living in a movie scenario, right?
Right.
And, we lived through, of course, pandemic. We all, got to the other end. Those lucky of us, of course, we know there's been a very high number of victims as well.
Yeah.
And then, it came the Russian invasion in Ukraine, another episode that, at least, being here in Europe, and of course, my home country, Romania, it's a neighbor of Ukraine. It's a very real and very difficult to digest event.
Yeah.
And then, you realize that maybe, some of us, or, the recent generations, we really took for granted all the good things that have been happening around the world for many, many decades. Everything, the globalization, the number of wars going down, the conflicts, everything. It looked like, it will continue to be friendlier and friendlier, and, realize that finally we need each other and we have one single planet and we should take care of it, and so on. And then you get the COVID, and then you get, a war, and then you get, Middle East instability. So I think, it made me realize to, be a lot more grateful for what we have. And again, I'm trying to remind also the people around me, because unfortunately I see a lot of people now end up with burnout, and for all the wrong reasons. I mean, it's a corporate job that pushes the burnout, when actually, if you look logically at it, you have everything you need to flourish in life, right? But somehow, we don't manage to have that balance. And I feel like, also the climate change, it's also something that, I mean, we cannot change it. It is here. But I see it as something that brings us closer together. I mean, we realize there are no barriers. We're all breathing the same air. We're all influenced, by the same, systemic changes on this planet. And that's how I feel, especially the younger generations. They give me so much hope. I mean, they just grow, being connected to this. I see, my son at 5, he's watching cartoons about climate change, and I was like, wow, it's such a different reality, and he's, seeing how the animals are impacted and the people. So it's like this generation grows with realizing something's massively broken, we need to fix it. And I love it also when they put the pressure on their parents. I mean, I hear, corporate leaders and say, gee, my teenage son, just told me, like, what are you doing, Dad? I mean, how are you contributing to this? And, people are shocked, because that's not, something you expect. So yeah, I have big hope in the younger generation, and I feel like, as any crisis, will just bring us closer together, and will accelerate us getting, our forces to make a difference and fix what has been broken.
Yeah, super well said. And I'm grateful you're a leader who cares, and I'm grateful for your son. I'm grateful for your son being able to watch that and everything also, because that is where the hope is. And we actually just started really quick on Leaders Who Care, the youngest youth of 8 to 18-year-olds. And we actually have been calling them, they're supposed to be the future leaders who care, but they're apparently becoming the present future leaders who care, because they're doing it already. And you can see some on our Leaders Who Care series. This gal that just turned 11 is writing her 5th book about family and everything. And another young lady from Liberia, 12 years old, started a skincare company because she was bullied about how she looked, and realized that we all have melanin, started a skincare company at 12 so that kids could be empowered in their own skin, as she describes it.
Amazing.
So there's the hope that you're talking about right there. And your 5-year-old is only 3 years away from being on Leaders Who Care. So get them going.
Book the Zoom meeting now.
Exactly. Thank you for being a leader who cares, and thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate it.
I really loved engaging with you, Mark. Thank you so much for the kind invitation.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.